And that's the difference. That's really how you know, okay, we're onto something here, because it makes logical sense in hindsight. In reverse, it's logical. We just, because of our logical construct, couldn't get there. So I think that's a very, very important point to make for anyone who's skeptical. The logic test afterwards will prove the idea crazy or not.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Boom Studio, a show where we unpack business ideas, share entrepreneurial journeys, and interview some of the brightest innovators in South Africa. In this episode, Allister Cousins breaks down what it really means to embrace out-of-the-box thinking and how constructive, creative thinking can achieve workable and inspiring solutions. Let's get into the episode. Hey everyone, this is Travis Lima here, and I'm with Allister Cousins on the Boom Studio podcast. How are you doing today, Al?
I'm great, thanks, Trev. How are you?
Yeah, no, I am doing very well, thank you. I know that we've recently been chatting a little bit about out-of-the-box thinking. And before I ask you to share your thoughts, I have to be honest that when you hear out of the box thinking, it's become such a kind of cliche, almost like a poster upon a corporate office wall. Everyone kind of knows, like, sure, we need to be thinking out the box, but what does that even mean? And I know that you recently wrote an article, and there's a lot of compelling ideas in there, and I think we're going to break that down in today's episode a little bit. But
Cool.
can you talk a little bit about, how out of the box thinking maybe started as a good initiative, but then it's kind of, became just a everyday kind of slogan and the significance there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like a lot of things. There's there's something happens in time and it's great, and then it becomes jargon or cliche and becomes widely kind of said without, and loses the initial process. So out the box thing, to think outside the box. The little piece that I wrote, you're referring to, is called "What's the Box," and for me, it was interesting to really, assess that. What is this box? So think outside the box. Um, the statement or the suggestion, to think outside the box is often like a vague, okay, come up with some crazy ideas, or think differently about this thing that you're trying to do, right? Think outside the box. So, yeah, I think it's just a case of it become cliche, and people generally get the feel like, I mean, think differently, but how do I constructively think differently to really arrive at an idea that's not simply just a crazy idea, but a workable solution? And I think there's huge value in understanding how to constructively think outside the box.
Because you can maybe overdo it, I think, with out the box thinking. And I think that's part of the, I want to say danger, but I also know that there's a lot of progress that can be made with that. But it is certainly something that I've seen when someone says we need to think a little bit out the box here. It's often met with like an eye roll, like, yes, we know. So
Mm.
how is your article out the box from the usual out of the box thinking?
So it's not that what I'm saying here is different to the correct understanding of out the box thinking. I think the issue lies in how people perceive or understand it. So to kind of answer that, I think there's a lot of sort of mysticism around creative thinking, creative solutions in general. Um, So, people are generally consider themselves either creative or not. And you have creative agencies, you have creatives, and these are people who are somehow gifted perhaps at coming up with creative stuff, right? And creative, yeah, I don't mean artistic. I don't mean anything to do necessarily with anything visual necessarily, but creative means a type of thinking to arrive at a solution no one else could see or that wasn't initially apparent. All right. So to come up with a creative solution, you look at a lot of the great thinkers throughout history, from Albert Einstein, right the way through history. They've really believed strongly in imagination, creativity, creative thinking, as opposed to just logical thinking processes. So when we talk about out the box thinking, what we're really saying is the box is that the logical sort of confines or restraints that are placed upon us through uh, you know tradition, status quo, industry standards, all the accepted norms, basically how other people think something should be. That's the box, right? So what I've really seen hugely effective and valuable in terms of business and brand building and product development and marketing is out the box thinking. Now, out the box thinking is pretty much lateral thinking. Again, lateral thinking is a term that was coined by Edward de Bono. Edward de Bono, he recently passed away. He was perhaps the greatest thinker of our time, maybe of all time. He started as a physician. He understood neural networks. He understood how the brain works. So the brain works as a self-organizing mechanism, right, for information that comes into us. So basically, Trav, what I've seen is as humans, we receive information and our brain organizes that information, right? And there's a lot between conscious and subconscious states of mind that happens. But essentially, the order in which you receive information growing up or in a particular setting, that information comes in a particular order and it builds upon itself, right? So that's what builds your worldview. It's what builds your perception of things. It builds your outlook. It builds your understanding. And if you could have not received that particular piece of information then, but rather a piece of information you later receive earlier, that construct might be totally different, right? So that's a fascinating thing about the human brain, how it's designed. And so these constructs are kind of built in our mind. So when we talk about out the box thinking, and move away from the cliche term, and now when I was writing this piece, I know, like, think outside the box, that is so abused, misused. And I wanted to call it that, and I wanted to tackle the box because of this very thing, this hugely undervalued thing that's right in front of everybody. So I don't know if I can go a little bit now into sort of the practical or how it works in terms of lateral or out the box thinking in as simple way as possible.
Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, I just have a question that I fear we might not circle back to once we dive into the article.
Sure.
So yes, I agree with you, and I've recently heard a term that I was speaking to someone recently, and they said you're only as good as your last trauma. So I know that you were speaking about cultural, environmental aspects that form your thinking, and in his case, it's in a similar way. let's say if you experienced the loss of job, and that is obviously a traumatic event, and therefore that shapes the way you perceive a certain situation, let's say finance, where instead of being a little bit more liberal with money or possibly generous, you're a little bit more frugal. You're holding your funds close to your cards close to your chest because you don't know what tragedy is around the next bend. So that kind of feels like it fits in a similar, maybe it's not entirely.
Yeah,
um
I think, yeah, definitely. That event has built, you know, it's an impression. You build on it, and then the tricky thing there, or the thing we do, we build further on that. That becomes a building block. It becomes a foundational aspect of our logical thinking. So when we go and rationalize finance, it's always from that point onwards. So I think it's a good point. I think that this is definitely, we're talking about like cognitive patterns and all these kind of things, and it's far wider than simply creative thinking. But it is that, your worldview is shaped, and that's why often you suddenly meet someone or to talk to someone, and it's like, oh whoa, my mind is set free here by what this person's saying, because they're able to come with a completely different perspective on something that like quells all your fears, or whatever it is. And you're like, oh yeah, I didn't see it like that. That helped me so much. And that's what help is really. It's oftentimes just another way of seeing something. If you think about that, another way of seeing something literally means like you've gone and looked at it from another side. And that's pretty much out the box.
yeah, and I think that leads to my question of how, and again, if we're going to tackle this in the article, let me know. But how do we position ourselves to be
Yeah, yeah.
receptive of out the box thinking? Because I'll
Yeah, no,
tell
it's
you why.
exactly what it is. Yeah.
When I was running a small business, and I was, literally running around like a chicken without a head, I felt that I was almost imprisoned to my little box. The way I was
Yeah,
thinking, the way I was dealing with customers, there was just
totally.
no time. And it was
Yeah,
almost, I got a sense that one needs to take a step back, but often we are,
yeah.
locked in, and it's not so easy to get those revelations. So have you got any thoughts on that?
No, exactly, exactly. No, well, that's exactly what lateral thinking techniques are. Um, because and that's the frustrating thing with someone just throwing out, "Oh well, think outside the box, man." Okay, what the heck does that mean? What must I do now? Exactly. And actually just adds to the frustration, especially in a stressful situation. You need a solution. You need it quickly. Um, Edward de Bono, who really pioneered lateral thinking and a lot of these techniques. Uh, at the time, he came out with a lot of them in the '60s. I mean, he's got such a proven track record with some of the biggest businesses in the world. I mean, you just go and Google a little bit about Edward de Bono. But he said within 10 to 20 seconds, you're going to start coming with ideas, right? If you're stuck, just by applying this stuff, and you'll see it now. So the big thing with this, right, is to apply lateral thinking to something. So sorry, I read a tweet today. Someone said, "Ideas are easy, execution is hard." So I just want to throw that in up front. Anyone listening, they're like, "Oh man, ideas! Everyone's got ideas." Yeah, sure, everyone's got ideas. A lot of them are dumb, and a lot of them are crazy, and a lot of them are impractical. Ideas, uh, good, creative, workable ideas are not easy. You'll see now with applying proper technique, they're easy, but um, and when you come to a good creative idea, what comes with it is energy. You There's a drive to see this thing come to life. And I think that helps with the execution. That doesn't take away responsibility and commitment and all those those aspects to executing, but it definitely a really like an epiphany, like a wow, oh my gosh, that excites. It excites teams, it excites people, and I think that's what's so awesome about this. It's not just the solution itself, but the energy it brings with it. So, um, so yeah, we can dive into it a little bit, and I can try my best to bring out how it works for you. Um,
I think I'm ready to dive in. I feel like
cool.
we've already submerged ourselves quite a bit, but
All
okay.
right.
So what is the starting point, and how can we practically start using these techniques to help us?
Cool. There's several techniques. So and just having a look at Edward de Bono's stuff. There's a few techniques he uses. I'm just going to touch on what you call provocation, and then the escape and the reverse or reversal technique. Right. So let me unpack that a little bit for you. So you asked earlier, how do you get your mind? How do you do that? How do you're stuck here? How do you now shift your thinking entirely? So going back to what I said in the beginning, we've got these logical thought trains, kind of that are built in our brains, in our minds, and I've got a little illustration just to show that, um, where you
Sure.
could.
Let me just bring it up on screen real quick.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, that's just shows here in a very simple manner. So let's
Is
say
this the
those
right one?
black, yeah, let's say those black paths are these kind of, uh, you can almost say they're like ditches in your brain, in your mind, where thoughts come in. They come in and they build it on each other from one direction, and that's your logical thinking. So logical thinking, we must not undermine it in any way. Logical thinking is incredibly valuable, right? For where logical thinking is valuable. It's valuable in system design, it's valuable in process design, it's valuable in a lot of things, and good logical thinkers are invaluable. Now your thoughts come in basically, and we what you need to do to come to a new idea, because you can try and find new ideas through logical thinking, but because you're building on all of these existing blocks and you're seeing things from one direction, you can't, your brain can't make the shift. That's quite simple. So basically what we need to do is, if you see that green little starburst thing happening there, that's somewhere where your mind kind of needs to go. Right now, this is fascinating because when I say this, it'll make some sense to you. You've experienced it, and I'm sure people listening have experienced just taking a break from what you're doing, just going for a walk, or being in a completely different place, or talking to someone completely unrelated to what you're doing. Suddenly there's an idea for what you were looking for. Suddenly something's triggered. Okay. And that is a very real, that is actually one of the techniques. We're not going to touch on it today. It's called creative pause. It's a technique, but that's where a lot of good ideas come while you're on holiday, while you're away, while you're going for a walk. Suddenly it's like, okay. And why? It's because your mind went to a place away from the logical pattern, right? And this is also, drugs have been associated with creativity since there was creativity and drugs. And there's a bit of truth in that. And I think drugs actually relax the mind, and that allows the mind to shift away from these logical patterns. And that's also why people can come up with ideas, right? Um, but what we're really saying with the lateral thinking technique is that you don't need drugs or to just walk in forests endlessly to come up with ideas, right? So if you don't mind just going back to that pattern diagram. So basically, once you come to an idea, right, that seems good, and you didn't follow the logical pattern, it brings a sense of excitement. Okay. Now, if I can explain it like this, humor, if you make a joke, the punchline of a joke jumps away from the logical sequence, okay, logical word sequence. What your brain is anticipating is not what it gets. It's suddenly the punchline is a twist. It's a jump away from where you thought this thing was going, and that's why you laugh. The jump away from logic is what produces laughter, humor. It's the same as a great idea. You get excited when you get a good idea. You like it's that same release that's happening, right? And that's what good ideas bring excitement. Now you can come up with a good idea, or it can seem like a good idea, but you can ask me, well, how do I know it's not just a crazy idea? So Albert Einstein had a quote. He said, if an idea at first doesn't seem absurd, then it has no hope. So all good ideas at first take you by surprise because it's just not what you thought of. If you were going to think of it logically, you would have thought of it, right? So it just goes, that's how it is. It pops out. All right. So how do we get to that green dot? How do we get to that green starburst there?
So just to cover that real quick or summarize it, there's these pathways in your mind, and I believe this to be biological. I've read about how
100%.
pathways literally are formed
100%.
in your brain,
Yeah.
and interrupting those pathways, interrupting those
Yes.
routine, maybe even mundane
Yes.
experiences, thoughts, is what
Mhm.
often leads to good ideas. So
Exactly.
randomness, events,
Yes.
and
Yes.
rest, they all contribute to these. Awesome. Okay, great.
Exactly.
So
Cool.
so how can we
Yeah, there's actually a technique. We won't touch on it today. It's called the random input method. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing when you're trying to come up with an idea to apply the simple random input method. I've done it. I've done it in workshops. I've done it in thinking sessions with different businesses, and never once has it failed to just unravel the most amazing thought processes that just were not there. And everyone's just like, what? So random input, yeah, but 100% right. Cool. All right. So how do we jump to that green starburst, that idea that's outside of the logical pattern? Okay. So I've kind of done a little bit of an example in that article. I think we can just share that link in the caption to this video if anyone wants to check that out. I use the example of a t-shirt business. You want to start a t-shirt business. I try to take the most, sort of common type of product and do something there. So De Bono, and you can go into his whole thing around this. I won't go into, but he said you need a provocation. Provocation provokes your mind. It provokes your mind outside of that, right? Outside of those logical sequences. So a provocation, you need to generate a provocation, okay, in order to start your thinking going there. So this is done really simply. So you basically take, okay, so we want to start a t-shirt company. We know that the market is flooded with different t-shirt options, but I love t-shirts. I think, if we can, whatever, I got a great production facility. There's a whole bunch of reasons I want to do this. I want to do it. Well, what can we do that's going to mean a good sort of profitability, and just being able to sell these things. So, okay, so we need some ideas. You don't know where to start. So basically what provocation one of the techniques is to then you write down everything about t-shirts or the t-shirt industry that everybody knows. Just statement after statement, absolutely taken for granted, common sense type stuff. So let's go like, okay, so you wear t-shirts. T-shirts have designs on them. T-shirts come in different colors. T-shirts are made from cotton. Just bam, 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 bam. Right?
So
A few
all
of
the
these things
obvious
down.
stuff.
All the obvious stuff. All the box stuff. All the logical pattern stuff that you've got in your mind that everyone knows. Like, you write that stuff down. Okay, and then you write that down, and it's good to have a decent list. You don't have to overdo it. You can have one or two, and in the article you'll see, I think I've got 4 of them, and then there's different provocation techniques that you apply to those statements. So you take one statement, so you wear t-shirts. So I said we'll touch on the escape and reverse techniques, right? So escape means you want to escape that statement, that normal statement. So you want to go, so people wear t-shirts. So the easiest way to do it is you rewrite that statement and you say, people do not wear t-shirts. Okay, people do not wear t-shirts. Then you will say, all right, so, and then you can apply the reverse one as well. Yeah.
So as you said that, I thought t-shirts for animals, which is probably a random little thing. Would that be part of
do you see
the
what
escape?
I did? But exactly, no, that's following the escape.
That's following the escape.
That's what the escape did for your mind. It suddenly took you to a green asterisk out there. That's how simple it is. And like, it seems so simple and almost silly, right? And so that's just one idea you had. It's not even in the article. Just from you kind of, suddenly it opened up your thinking. But wait, what if you don't wear t-shirts? Then who wears them? Then what do you do with them? Okay, so we'll get to that sort of, we'll get to how you now use the provocations. The other type of provocation is reverse. So it's not that you escape from it, you just flip it. You go, you don't wear t-shirts, t-shirts wear you. And now you're going like, oh, okay. Right. So you do that for all of your, there's more techniques. There's exaggeration, there's distortion, there's other ones, but we just take these two, reverse and escape. And you apply those to your different statements, right? So now we go to, you wear t-shirts, you don't wear t-shirts. Then you say, okay, now you question that. And a very good technique is now you actually mentally envisage t-shirts you don't wear. So it's called a moment by moment technique. You now take it, okay, so if I don't wear a t-shirt, what do I do with it? So okay, so you don't wear them. Well, then what do you do with them? Well, you frame them. You hang them on the wall. Oh, wow. Okay, why would you frame a t-shirt? Well, because it's got a signature on it of a famous person. Oh, wait. Okay, so let's collaborate with a few celebrities, get them to sign t-shirts, sell them for $1,000. Suddenly we're selling less t-shirts, higher margins. Like, okay, that's that's cool. There's something to explore there. Put it there. Okay. Very important. You don't run away with that idea. And De Bono's big on this. Do not just get locked in that first idea. You need to really go through the process. You need to exhaust ideas. Okay.
Is that where, so the ideas coming in, and I see that now, is this probably a bit too early, but is this the point where logical thinking goes in to start validating
Not
that
yet.
idea, or
Not yet.
So we're not gonna
entire,
deep dive on our
No.
shirt signed products just yet.
Not too deep.
Okay.
We want to apply the reverse and escape provocation to all our statements first, and we can note a few ideas, But the testing of ideas, the validating ideas is very critical, and it's a next phase. It's the next thing we do. And there's a very good way to do that, because then you will see which ideas are simply crazy and not impractical, not feasible. And then you'll see which ideas have legs, meaning it can potentially go forward, right? So basically, so now you want to apply the reverse technique. So t-shirts wear you. Okay, and that'll start a whole bunch of thoughts. Okay, well, people can send in their avatars that we can print on shirts, or so I've put it in the article here. T-shirts have designs on them. Escape, they have no designs on them. Reverse, designs have t-shirts on them. Oh, now we feel a little bit silly talking like this. Write it down. T-shirts come in different colors. Escape, t-shirts don't come in different colors. Colors come in t-shirts. I'm pretty sure stuff starts coming to mind now. Colors come in t-shirts. What? Can we get like a chemical reaction that unlocks colors when you wash it? Can we send a dye kit with the t-shirt wrapped inside? The packaging is the t-shirt. So suddenly it's like, what the heck? They're made from cotton. They're not made from cotton. Cotton is made from t-shirts. Reverse. Crazy. Cotton is made from t-shirts. Okay, so you're writing all those things down. Then you're going to go through them. You're going to question them. You're going to apply a moment-by-moment technique. Another example away from t-shirts, just to elaborate, take restaurants, for example. Restaurants, you pay for your food. That's a given. That's a norm. Now we reverse it. Now we escape it. Restaurants, you do not pay for your food. Okay, now we're going to attack that moment by moment. I come into a restaurant where I don't pay for my food. So what do I pay for? Time. Okay, great. Time. So now I can eat as much as I want, but I'm charged per minute. So this is an illustration De Bono uses in his explanations. And if you think about that, is that something we can use? Will that stop that guy who's coming and drinking one cup of coffee and leeching off of our establishment? Will we is there something there? So put it there on ice. All right. Cool. So once you've gone through that and you've got some initial ideas, then you can start applying other techniques. And Trav, this is why brainstorming is dangerous and often destructive and often fruitless and often exhausting. Let's brainstorm it. Brainstorm it, what does that mean? A bunch of people get around and throw out ideas, and then what? Who decides what? How do we know?
I think that is quite an important point to touch on, because there is this connotation with out the box thinking, brainstorming, wild ideas. And I know that you said it in this quote that I'm looking at. Thinking outside the box is not some wild brainstorming session, but deliberately thinking outside of current restrictions. So it sounds like there's a merger of wild thinking, but also in a logical kind of way. And, maybe for the skeptics out there, the corporate people, the very analytical people, is this something that's going to be useful to them? Because I
love them. I love them. I love those people.
I don't want them to get stuck on t-shirts and color t-shirts and almost rolling,
we're talking about new ideas for electric vehicles. We're talking about business strategy ideas. We're talking about any idea. You write down the norms in that industry. You write down, insurance. What are we talking about? Anything, right? And the most fascinating, energized, engaging sessions I've seen is with people in industries where it's just so, this is how it's done. Take structured. The accounting industry, take the and suddenly, And people are people. We get excited. We love it. People are creative. We are intrinsically creative. We're just not given the opportunity. Society suppresses, and it makes it this weird thing where it's drug-induced visions of whatever and weird brainstorming stuff. No, so brainstorming, very dangerous, very bad for creativity. Yeah, you might get some stuff. Cool. I've been in brainstorming sessions where, but often it's really someone needs to guide the process. So let's look at now. We got a bunch of ideas on the table. De Bono talks about the 6 thinking hats. It's a whole book, and it's really how to generate, validate, test ideas. And this is very important for the analytical people. I know I've been in sessions with very analytical people, and that thinking is crucial. All right, because the practicality, the viability, feasibility, all these things surrounding an idea, like without that, of course, it's not going to fly. So we're not talking about just generating crazy ideas and we're all going to run off outside and implement them like hooligans. This is really becomes part of company culture. It becomes a part of a vision. It's something people can work towards. How do we do that? We got to validate those ideas. We've got to test them. So let's say you apply this process we talked about. There's more to it. There's other techniques. You really run through it. Suddenly, ideas are being generated. It's amazing. Okay. Now we're going to bring that together. So the 6 thinking hats, whether you apply the whole process or however you apply this, and there's various ways to do that. But it's incredibly powerful because 6 thinking hats is there's different hats, right? The black hat is the sort of pessimistic, compliance, regulatory, why it won't work. Why this thing won't work? Okay. Very important not to be looked down on. If you don't have that, ideas are not going to fly. Okay. Very important. Then you've got the red hat. So let's say we got a group of people around. We got some ideas now on the table. And what so often happens in brainstorms or meetings, people have feelings. They feel a way about an idea. They feel a way about something, and they just don't like it. They can't say why, or they can say why. But because we're in a professional environment, we disguise our argument that is really our feeling with all sorts of stuff. Well, the tax regulations, well, that's not going to work. Okay, and the idea doesn't move because you're saying that. You know more than me about that. I don't know. So now I'm going to take your word for it. Ideas killed. And that happens in corporate environments all the time. Good ideas are killed. With a proper group discussion technique like the 6 thinking hats, what we do is then there's someone with the blue hat and they lead the session, right? They're just there to facilitate, lead, and guide. And they basically say, right, everyone, red hats on. Now, red hats is how you feel. Say how you feel about this idea up front. You don't need to substantiate it. You can. How do you feel? Get it. I've done this. It's amazing. I've sat in a meeting where, the MD is just not for something. And, if they don't get that off their chest up front, we're not going to get anywhere. I don't like it. I just don't think it's going to work. They don't have to say why. So everyone gets red thinking hats. How do we feel about this? Cool. Black thinking hats. Everyone. So black thinking hat viewpoints, very needed. Now you force that optimistic, like guy who's just like, oh, it's brilliant. Now you ask him to put on the black thinking hat as well. What problems do you potentially see as well? So we're not just hearing it from the accounts department or the compliance department, but you need to think about it as well. And when everyone's in the same thing, thinking about it, wow. Okay, then we can really look at this. Then you go, okay, so cool. Then there's the green thinking hat. the yellow thinking hat. Yellow thinking hat, what are the benefits? What are the benefits? How will we actually do this? And now everyone thinks yellow. So black thinking hat people who normally think black hat, in a black hat manner, they're now asked to think yellow. You had your time to think black, now think yellow. Now everyone, and it's a game, and you play this game, and everyone feels like they're contributing. And you can't not contribute, right? That's the psychology of a group. I'm going to seem like a bit of a party pooper if I don't agree or contribute now. So suddenly it's like everyone's engaging and contributing. Green has to do with new thoughts, new ideas, and you can have a. So anyway, sorry, Trevia.
No, I was just going to say I'm actually quite excited by that idea because in those times where I've been in a brainstorming session where you're feeling a certain thing, you also have that peer pressure where you have to put yourself out there, share something, and you don't know if it's going to be good or bad, or maybe it gets shot down. Maybe someone loves it, but there's a lot of different variables that can go into that, and you're actually playing much more of a social game than actually trying to tackle the idea that you're trying to build. And then often what I've found is there's one person who's usually the person who's in charge of the company or whatever, and they are the ones that essentially should have just done it by themselves and told everyone else what to do. So this actually puts everyone on the same page.
It's beautiful.
And when you have that good idea or excited idea, then you just wait for that particular time to use it. And the same goes for like a pessimistic idea. You can voice it.
Exactly. Yeah,
safely.
You're going to have your call. There's going to be that window, and everyone's going to have to voice on that particular viewpoint. No, you can read more about it, but it really dissolves so many of these group dynamics that are toxic or counterproductive. So many, bias, agenda, ego in a group dynamic, exactly, and why did you call us all together if you're just going to tell us what to do but ask us what we think? I can't. So no, this is something where if you really want good ideas, and this is the thing where people go, ideas are easy. No, they're not. Let's do this. Okay. They're easy when you do this, but let's do this. Then you'll get to really good ideas. And then the execution is much easier, right? Can you imagine coming out of a session like that? You've come to an idea and everyone's like, let's execute. We're all in. We've all contributed. We all see the value. Now it's just a case of, right, I'm going to do this. Who will help with that? Who's going to do that? It's far more than the responsibility, commitment, all those aspects come. So no, it's fascinating to do that. But the validation, the testing, take it through that process, and it's really remarkable at what can come out. And as I say, you've dissolved all those group dynamics that are counterproductive, and there's really an energy, and that's a big thing.
Amazing. So Al, I know that this is a huge topic to cover, and where can we read up or discover more about it? Firstly, on your article, maybe you want to just drop us the URL that we can learn more about it, and maybe also where can we read up more from Ed De Bono? What sort of books do you recommend?
He's got a good summary book called Serious Creativity. This is written years ago, and he worked with big brands from Ford to, Japanese brands, Western brands, really wealth of experience there. So out of all of that, he wrote, and he uses many illustrations. So Serious Creativity is the one that sums up a lot of the techniques. He wrote the book Lateral Thinking. I think he wrote 60 books. It's no joke. So Lateral Thinking, Serious Creativity came a bit later, and he tidies up and he's kind of put it into this book, The Six Thinking Hats. But go on to any of your major ebook, audiobook sites. He's even written a book, how to how to get something about a beautiful mind. I've got it in my library, but that's just actually everyday living, how to think about stuff, non-judgmental, how to think of the other perspective, all these kind of things. So he was a fascinating man, really good thinker. And you can for life, more than, we're talking about business, but just how it counters the normal human reaction and tendency in how we think to look at things from another perspective. And the more you exercise yourself in this, so for myself, being in sort of the branding and creative communication space, it's something that becomes more and more reactive or immediate. You'll hear something and you instantly flipping it in your mind. You instantly it's just the it's the knee jerk, bam. Well, what about that way? And that's why very quickly, and people who can do that can be perceived as creative. And you're just asking these questions, and you're challenging. Challenging is another one of the techniques. But why is it always done like that? Can't it be done like this? So a lot of these seemingly obvious things, if done properly, can produce great results. So yeah, look at De Bono's work. I'm not too clued up on many other thinkers like this. I see some other people have pushed some of his theories further, and there's a lot of different really creative, entrepreneurs, but he really pioneered creative thinking as a discipline. So definitely have a look at more of his stuff.
Perfect. Okay, so for those interested, check out thoughtcastle.co.za. The article "What's the Box" is live at the moment, so you can go and check that out. Al, I know that we had a good place to wrap up there, but there's one last thing that I want to just maybe quickly touch on. For those who are listening who are skeptical, because I feel like we've spoke a lot about the creative side. There's different color hats, and I'm just imagining someone sitting there going, this is not for me. And I know that you shared with
accountants
an
accountants
example.
are the most creative people I know. Sorry, Trav.
So there's definitely value to go through this process. If I'm not mistaken, Ed De Bono did a session with Ford. Maybe you can just give us a very talk to that example that you shared with. It was something to do with a parking lot. I remember you mentioned it. That's a concrete example of this, the final result of this process in action with a large corporate company.
Sure. Look, he consulted with IBM, a lot of big companies, and actually it's very interesting, the Eastern Western mindsets to development, to thinking. Western being hugely on maintenance once something's created. The Japanese, for example, innovation. If something's perfect, what more can we do with it? So Ford being a really, I mean, Henry Ford, you sort of developing the motor car till years later. What he said to them was, it's a lump of engineering at the end of the day that you're trying to sell. So you can build more features into it, and this. But how do you rise above the competition here? So through a creative, one of the examples he gave them was, what if you did a creative session with them, and one of the examples was, okay, so you want more people to buy your Fords, to buy a certain line of your cars. So what if we looked at it totally differently and added value beyond the vehicle itself, right? So this kind of thinking has become much more mainstream. Apple and these kind of value monopolies or value ecosystems that you buy into, as opposed to just a product. But at the time, this was quite revolutionary. And the one idea they arrived at was, well, what if you bought up old parking lots in the inner city and branded them Ford and reserved them only for Ford owners? Just suddenly you're going like, oh, Okay, we've been trying here to, put a better air conditioning system or whatever. But you know, there. So that was something where you create value. He gives a lot of examples where, for example, with an airline company, he did a reverse or a distortion technique on airplanes land on their wheels. Airplanes land upside down, and later on, this sort of produced the fact that airplanes need cameras for the pilots to have visibility down there. So airplanes land on upside down. What would that allow? What would that do? What would the benefits be? The pilots would be able to see the runway. The pilots would be able to do this. So by kind of extrapolating all the ideas that would come from that, suddenly it's like, wait, but what if we do allow visibility down there? So initially it can seem silly, but it's part of a technique. And I think that's where the skepticism can come in, the silliness of the whole thing, the first and apparent. And that's why I referenced Einstein. And if you read a lot of Einstein's stuff, he was a brilliant mathematician, but if you understand how he saw creative thinking, and he said, if an idea isn't absurd, but as we touched on earlier, and well, I didn't fully explain it, but the difference between a crazy idea or a silly idea and a good workable idea, although you've jumped to it through lateral thinking or provocation, you've jumped outside, when you work it back, it's logical. When you take a crazy idea and work it back, it's never logical. And that's why the best ideas they're so obvious when you realize them. They're right in front of you, but you couldn't get there because you were blocked by your logical thinking. But when you work it back, it's like, yeah. So you might go like, oh, I had a good idea to solve this. We're going to do it like this. And the other person looks at you and goes, yeah, obviously. And that's the difference. That's really how you know, okay, we're onto something here, because it makes logical sense in hindsight. In reverse, it's logical. We just, because of our logical construct, couldn't get there. So I think that's a very, very important point to make for anyone who's skeptical. The logic test afterwards will prove the idea crazy or not.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Boom Studio podcast on the platform of your choice, or check out our website at theboom.studio for more details. Thanks for tuning in.